Harvard returned my check, Grandpa said, placing the envelope beside Sloane's plate. They have no student under your name. My cousin stopped smiling. Mom reached for the envelope. Mara wasn't using her $180,000 yet. I stared at her, using it for what Sloane's fiancé opened their mortgage portal. Then went pale. Why is Mara's signature in our condo file? My phone rang before anyone answered. Bay Harbor Lending wanted verbal confirmation that I had donated $130,000 toward a Cambridge condo. I had never spoken to that bank ever before. Harvard had never enrolled Sloane, but someone had used my future to buy hers. My name is Mara Collins, and by 28, I had learned that being the dependable one usually meant everyone believed my future could wait. I worked as a clinical research operations coordinator at a cancer center. My days were built around patient files, trial schedules, lab reports, and one uncompromising rule: every record had to match its source. A missing signature could delay treatment. A false one could destroy a study. At home, my signature apparently mattered less. Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Helen had created the Mara Collins Graduate Education Trust after I was accepted into a part-time master's program in clinical epidemiology and biostatistics. The trust held $180,000. I was the only beneficiary. It was designed to cover tuition, required fees, books, equipment, and housing costs while I studied. The money was not a family education pool, and it was not available to whoever had the most dramatic emergency. Mom was listed only as the family education liaison. She could forward invoices and help with paperwork. She could not change the beneficiary, redirect the money, or approve withdrawals for anyone else. Grandpa had told me, "This is not a reward for being my favorite. It is so you never need anyone's permission to build your future." That sentence mattered because Mom had spent years deciding my future could be postponed. My cousin Sloane lost her mother young, and Mom treated every disappointment in Sloane's life like a debt the rest of us owed. When I needed money for a certification, Mom said Sloane needed help launching her consulting brand. When I wanted to travel after college, Sloane was facing another business crisis. Whenever I objected, Mom gave the same answer: "Mara will be fine. I usually was." That became the excuse. The master's degree was supposed to move me into research management, raise my income, and finally let me stop working nights. I planned to study 3 evenings a week and graduate without student loans. When my program sent the first tuition invoice, Mom told me the trust was temporarily frozen while Commonwealth Fiduciary Bank upgraded its beneficiary system. She handled family paperwork for my grandparents, so I believed her. I deferred enrollment for 1 year, accepted extra night shifts, and began saving to cover the first semester myself. I thought the delay was administrative. 3 weeks later, Sloane posted a photo in front of Harvard Yard beneath the caption, "Sometimes the life you prayed for arrives all at once." What I did not know was that my trust had already been emptied. Sloane's Harvard announcement arrived with perfect lighting. She posted videos outside Harvard Yard, wore crimson sweaters, and called the next chapter of her life an academic reinvention. There were packing lists, campus coffee shops, apartment tours, and advice about networking in the Ivy League. What she never posted was a class schedule. No student portal, no professor's name, no assignment. Whenever I asked what program she had joined, Sloane said it was interdisciplinary and not structured like a normal degree. Mom told me not to interrogate her. "Let her enjoy this," she said. "Not everyone gets an opportunity like Harvard." Sloane's fiancé, Adrian, believed her too. He was a product manager for an education software company, practical enough to ask about numbers but trusting enough to accept the answers she gave him. According to Sloane, Harvard had covered most of her tuition through a scholarship. The rest came from a family education grant and approved graduate housing support. That explanation helped convince Adrian to buy a $684,000 condo with her in Cambridge. Their closing was scheduled for the Monday after Thanksgiving. Sloane posted staged photographs from the building's rooftop and called it our first real investment. I liked the post from the hospital cafeteria during a night shift. At that point, I still thought my own trust was locked behind a banking delay. Grandpa believed Sloane was enrolled too. When she told him Harvard required a $9,600 program and technology fee, he wrote the check directly to the university. He refused to hand it to Mom. "If it is for school, the school gets paid," he said. 2 weeks later, the envelope came back. The notice said Harvard could not locate a student account under Sloan Mercer's name. The account number on the invoice did not match the school's format. Grandpa called the official bursar's office. They would not discuss private student information, but they confirmed the payment reference was invalid. He did not confront Sloan over the phone. He placed the returned check inside his jacket and waited for Thanksgiving. That week, I worked 3 night shifts because I was still saving for the semester Mom said my trust could not cover yet. I arrived at my grandparents' house carrying my laptop and wearing a sweater over hospital scrubs. Sloan arrived in a new Harvard sweatshirt with a glossy brochure for the Cambridge condo. She spent dinner describing seminars, research groups, and the view from the rooftop. Grandpa listened without interrupting. Then he reached into his jacket. By the time he placed that envelope beside her plate, my education trust had been empty for 93 days. The room went silent when Grandpa placed the envelope beside Sloane's plate. "Why did Harvard return my check?" he asked. Sloane's smile flickered. "There must be a processing error." Grandpa unfolded the notice. "They say there is no student account under your name." Mom reached across the table. "Arthur, this is not the time." "What check?" I asked. Mom's face tightened. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. Mara wasn't using her $180,000 yet. Sloan had a deadline. I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "She used my trust. It was temporary," Mom said. "You already had a job." Sloan had one chance to establish herself at Harvard. Grandma set down her fork. "Did Mara agree?" Mom looked at me as if the answer should have been obvious. She would have, if everyone had stopped making this sound so dramatic. "I never agreed," I said. "I never signed anything." Grandpa's voice went flat. "Then how was the money moved?" Sloan finally spoke. "It was approved as graduate housing support." Adrian turned toward her. "You told me Harvard covered your tuition." "It did." "Then why did you need Mara's entire trust?" Sloan looked down. Adrian opened the mortgage portal on his phone. Their Cambridge condo was scheduled to close Monday morning, and he wanted to see exactly how the down payment had been documented. His thumb stopped moving. He enlarged one page, read it twice, then held the phone toward me. "Why is Mara's signature in our mortgage file?" The document identified me as the donor of $130,000. It stated that the money was an unconditional gift, that I expected no repayment, and that I understood it would be used to purchase Sloan and Adrian's condo. A copy of my driver's license was attached. So was a signature that looked like mine. "It isn't," I said. "I never signed that." My phone rang before anyone answered. The caller introduced himself as Evan Ross from Bay Harbor Lending's Quality Control Department. He said the bank needed verbal confirmation before Monday's closing. "Ms. Collins, can you confirm that you voluntarily gifted $130,000 to Sloan Mercer and Adrian Cole?" "No." The table went still. "I have never spoken to your bank. I never donated any money. And I did not sign that affidavit." His tone changed immediately. "Do not disconnect." He placed me on hold, then returned less than a minute later. "The closing has been moved into fraud review. No funds will be released until we verify the source." Mom pushed back from the table. "You are going to make Sloan lose her home over paperwork." "She does not own the condo," I said. "And that is not paperwork. That is my name." Sloan's voice rose. The condo was graduate housing. The money was still helping someone get an education. Grandpa looked at her. "You do not attend Harvard. I was planning to reapply." Adrian stared at her. "You told me classes had already started." Grandpa called Commonwealth Fiduciary Bank's emergency line. The trust officer confirmed that a beneficiary direction and release had been submitted in my name 93 days earlier. It claimed I had voluntarily reassigned the trust to Sloan. It also claimed I had appeared in person before a notary on a Thursday evening. I checked my work calendar. That night, I badged into the cancer center at 6:48. Then I looked at Mom. Whoever signed my name knew I was working. They just assumed no one would ever ask me. The next morning, Grandpa, Grandma, and I joined a secure call with Paula Green, the trust officer at Commonwealth Fiduciary Bank. She shared the beneficiary direction and release on screen. It contained my full name, driver's license number, old address, and a signature copied closely enough to survive a quick review. An email from an account, one letter different from mine, confirmed that I was voluntarily giving Sloan access to the entire trust. Mom's status as family education liaison had allowed her to submit the packet. It had not given her authority to sign it. The document claimed I had appeared before Leah Benton, a notary and one of Mom's longtime friends. I sent Paula my hospital records. My badge opened the cancer center employee entrance at 6:48 that evening. I logged into the clinical research server minutes later, signed electronic trial records from the hospital network, and appeared on a recorded video meeting at 9. Leah's journal said I had signed in front of her across town during the same hours. Her office footage showed no sign of me. It showed Mom arriving with a folder. The education records were worse. The bank had received an acceptance letter, enrollment verification, tuition estimate, student number, and housing budget carrying Harvard branding. The student number used the wrong format. The registrar's signature had been copied from a public document. The program name did not match the school catalog. Harvard confirmed there was no enrollment record for Sloan. She had attended one public 2-day workshop and used those photographs to build an entire graduate student identity online. Then Paula traced every dollar. $96,000 had gone into the condo's down payment escrow. $34,000 had been reserved for closing costs, homeowners' fees, and furniture. $22,000 paid Sloan's credit cards. $16,000 funded travel, clothing, and content production. $8,000 went to an admissions consultant and document preparation service. $4,000 remained. Not $1 had paid tuition. The condo was listed as graduate housing, but it would belong only to Sloan and Adrian. I was identified as a donor, not an investor. After closing, I would have had no ownership, no repayment rights, and no legal claim to the money. Adrian asked Sloan to unlock her phone. A message appeared from 3 months earlier. Once closing happens, Mara can't make Grandpa undo it. Mom had replied. She'll be angry, but she always lands on her feet. I read the exchange twice. They had not believed I agreed. They had believed completion would make my objection inconvenient enough to ignore. Bay Harbor Lending froze the closing and preserved the mortgage file. The bank locked the remaining trust funds, removed Mom's access, and sent notices to retain the notary journal, office footage, emails, and identification records. I froze my credit, changed every password, and revoked Mom's authority to receive financial mail or speak to institutions for me. Mom called that an overreaction. You already stopped the closing, she said. What else do you want my name back? Adrian stood across from Sloan in my grandparents' kitchen. Was Harvard ever real? I was going to reapply. Was the scholarship real? She said nothing. He held up the mortgage file. What else did you expect me to discover after I signed? Sloan began crying and accused me of destroying their future, but Adrian did not look at me. Mara did not create this problem, he said. You built our mortgage on a lie you expected me to inherit. Then he opened their credit report. The condo was not the only debt she had hidden from him. Monday morning, Bay Harbor Lending canceled the closing. The lender's notice cited a disputed source of funds, a denied donor affidavit, false enrollment information, and a mortgage application that could no longer be verified. Sloan did not lose a home she owned. She lost the chance to buy one with money that had never belonged to her. $96,000 returned from escrow, the $34,000 reserved for closing costs, homeowners' fees, and furniture was released back to the trust. The remaining $4,000 stayed frozen. $134,000 was recovered almost immediately. $46,000 had already been spent. Grandpa wanted to replace it that afternoon. No, I said. If you refill the trust now, they will call this a family accounting mistake. He studied me, then nodded. Diane and Sloan signed a repayment agreement. Mom contributed $18,000 from savings. Sloan sold camera equipment, designer bags, and luxury clothing for $11,500. Canceled travel and refundable deposits returned another $4,500. The final $12,000 would be repaid over 24 months. 2 missed payments would make the entire balance due. Mom called the agreement cruel. Grandpa answered, "You did not help one granddaughter. You chose the granddaughter you believed was easier to sacrifice." He and Grandma removed Mom from every financial role she held. Her power of attorney was revoked. She lost access to their document safe, trusts, and beneficiary records. No future request could pass through her. Leah Benton surrendered her notary journal and office footage to the State Review Board. Her commission was suspended while the investigation continued. I did not choose her punishment. I only supplied the evidence proving she had certified a woman who never entered her office. Adrian's credit review uncovered $43,600 in debt Sloan had hidden from him, inflated projected income, and business expenses disguised as academic costs. He canceled the mortgage application and postponed the wedding for 6 weeks. He asked Sloan to provide complete financial records. Every disclosure uncovered another lie, when she described the Harvard story as branding rather than fraud. He ended the engagement. "Mara did not take our condo," he told her. "You used her future to create the down payment." Diane called me afterward. "You recovered most of the money. What more do you need? Most of my future is not all of it." "You can still start school." "I can. 1 year later, after working nights for a delay you invented." She said family should be allowed to make mistakes. I looked at the repayment agreement carrying her real signature. This was not a mistake. A mistake does not require forged permission. That evening, Commonwealth Fiduciary Bank restored my private portal access. For the first time. No one in my family stood between me and the future that had my name on it. For the next 6 months, Mom and Sloan could contact me only by email. They were not allowed to keep copies of my identification, speak to banks or schools on my behalf, use my name to explain family money, or appear at my apartment without permission. There would be no loans, no temporary transfers, no emergencies that somehow required my future. Mom called the rules cold. "Trust is not restored by asking the person you betrayed to stop keeping records," I wrote back. In January, I began the master's program I had postponed. I reduced my night shifts, submitted every tuition invoice through my private trust portal, and received confirmation for each payment. On the first evening of class, I opened the same laptop I had carried through months of overnight work. The money was returning. The year was not. 1 year later, Grandpa asked how school was going. I showed him my grades and the research proposal I was preparing, not because I needed to prove I deserved the trust, because it was finally doing what he created it to do. That night, Mom emailed me. "At least everything is back where it belongs." I answered, "The money is. The relationships are not." Sloan replied minutes later, "So you are cutting off family over school money, no?" I stepped away because you forged my permission and treated my future like unused inventory. Grandpa later asked whether I regretted refusing to keep the peace. I looked at my class schedule. Where my night shifts used to be, I regret waiting so long to understand that being fine was never the same as consenting. For the first time, my future was not waiting for anyone else to decide when I could have it. They returned the education fund, but they could not return the year I spent believing my future had simply been delayed. Mom thought I would survive one more sacrifice because I always had before. She was right about one thing. I survived. I just stopped surviving for their convenience. Sloan did not lose Harvard. She had never been enrolled. She did not lose a condo. She lost the chance to buy one with my name and my money. Would you have frozen the closing or stayed quiet to keep the family together? Comment below, subscribe, and stay for more family betrayals, hidden money, and clean revenge stories.